Hello, everyone. How are you guys? I am super, super excited to be here with you tonight. And so I wanted to say hello. I've seen people jumping in the comments, and Prasinia, Caroline, Bree, Sandra, Lauren. I am so excited to have you guys and everyone else that's here that just hasn't dropped into the comments yet. I am really ready to dive in and share some exciting things with you tonight. So, I loved looking at all the things that you learned last night, and I know that um, there's a lot that goes on in the college process, and we always think it's just that our kids are going to go in, they're going to apply, they're going to use, an application, they're going to submit, and it's just going to go like really smoothly. And it's not, a ton of things to do. And then all of a sudden we're learning that, wow, there is a lot of things going on behind the scenes that we're not aware of. So hello from New Jersey. Let's see. Somebody said Annie said hello to everyone. Again, Amy said she's excited about being here. So welcome to you from wherever you're at. So tonight we're going to dive in and I'm going to talk about how these decisions are made. And there is so much to this that there's no way I can give you all of the things that go into making these decisions, just because first of all, it would just make you feel overwhelmed and your heads would be spinning. But beyond that, what I want to do is take it and bring it down into a bite-sized piece for you so that you know the most important things, the things that you can actually affect and help your child affect in the college process. So let's jump right into it. Again, if you have questions, you can drop them in the chat. I try to keep an eye on what's going on in the chat and here, but it's easy to get distracted when I'm trying to watch both. But I definitely will come back and go back through the chat and make sure that I'm answering all questions that everybody has. So I want to make sure you get all the information that you need to feel confident as you leave tonight. So again, we're going to jump in to how decisions are made and what is driving these decisions. So the first thing we're going to talk about, or before I jump into that, I want to kind of go back through. I think most of you guys know me. You were here last night, but in case you weren't, this is my beautiful family, my amazing husband. We are both, I shared this last night, we're both widows, and we both have put 3 children through college each. We have 3 kids that have gone through the college process. We've walked through that. We have kids in the arts and sports. I don't know if I mentioned that last night, but we have kids that were recruited athletically, and we have kids that went through the audition process as artists, and then we have kids that are just gone through the general process of applying. And so we get where you're at. Absolutely. We both were widowed, young, came together, and I always say we're the modern day Brady Bunch. These are my beautiful grandchildren and our families. And so we do this not only do I do it to help you guys, but I also was able to help my own kids and my grandkids in the future. I have been recognized on and have been on several different news outlets, medias, podcasts. You can Google me and find me pretty much everywhere, so that you know that I really am a real person and not just somebody sitting behind a bunch of pictures on a website. And I'm also an author. And tonight I'm going to be giving away my book. So I've got all your names on my wheel of names that we will spin and find out who our winner tonight for the book is. So we'll definitely be doing that as we move forward. Additionally, I am a member of quite a few different organizations. I'm not only a member, but I also am on the board. I speak at all of our different organizations as well. So it's important to know that the person that you are working with abides by a code of ethics, which I do, and that what we're giving you is the right and correct information. So part of what I do as a college admissions expert is that I am there talking to the admissions offices. I'm talking to those counselors. I am meeting with recruiters. I am getting on those campuses. I am going to all of our national conventions, getting the most up-to-date information so that I can pass that on to you. I have an extensive education, and I have been in the education field and working with students for over 25 years. So that just lets you know, dates myself a little bit, but that's okay. I love my experience. I've worked with over 500 students in my private practice. I have been in all forms of education, from public school to private school to the homeschool sector, and now my own private business, which I have had since 2011. My students walk away with millions in scholarships. I think that's one of the things that I'm really proud about, is that I help my students really create college lists that are going to be right for them, not only from an academic perspective, but a social perspective, the perspective of either arts or sports or something to that effect if they have a specialty, but also financially, because I think that's an important piece to know where we are financially with the rising cost of college and so forth. We want our kids applying to schools that are going to give them more money and higher dollars and scholarships. And my kids have been, the students I've worked with have been accepted to over 1,500 colleges nationwide. So I know a lot about a lot of different universities. So now with that being, this is just a little smattering of my past students that just graduated and worked with me in my Accepted Academy and my group coaching programs. They got accepted into a lot of amazing colleges. And so just to brag on them a little bit, this was just a small percentage of the students that I worked with. Now, we're going to talk about what colleges are looking for. Okay. So, one of the big things that we have seen in a trend, and I talked about this last night, is that colleges are looking for they're doing a holistic review. So, what that means is that you have the academics, and I'm going to talk about this more in depth here in a little bit, but we have the academics, and then we have the rest of your application. So, while there are some schools that still, if you have a test score and you have the right GPA, you're most likely going to get in. But when you're looking at any school that is going to be in the more competitive range, like we talked about last night, whether it's the highly selective schools, the public Ivies, even state schools, those flagship schools that we're seeing more and more students applying to, private schools that give more money. There are definitely a lot of private schools out there that have more funding. So we are seeing more students apply to those schools. They're doing holistic reviews. We're going to talk about, are your academics still important? What is uniquely you? How important is your resume? We're going to talk about that. And how does my team go the extra mile? So we're definitely going to jump in to all of those things. Oh, somebody said my baby Gator was on that slide. Yay! I have to look at who was that one of mine. Oh yeah, Mira. So yes, your daughter was on there. So I loved working and getting to know you, and you went through this process with me last year. So I'm very proud of her and her accomplishments. So yes, so y'all can all talk to Sarah. She knows. She's been through this process once. So, okay. So we're going to talk about the holistic review. So, what's new since 2020? So in the last couple of years, since we came out of 2020, we have seen a lot of shift in what the colleges are doing and what the changes going on. We talked about a lot of that last night, so I won't go into that as much as I did, since we did that last night. But you just need to know that prior to 2020, things were already getting competitive. Things were already, changing. There was already a lot of talk about the holistic review and testing and all of those things. But when we hit 2020, that just shifted everything in a major way that opened up a door for all these things to kind of come in place. So, one of the things and one of the questions that I get a lot of times is, what happens when during that 2020, 2021, maybe your student didn't have as many activities. What did they do? When they look at that, what we call COVID resume now, how do colleges look at that? So we're going to talk about that. And that is the number one thing, is this holistic review. So a holistic review is where they look at everything in your student's application, not just the testing, not just their grades, all of those things, but they're looking at their resumes in depth. The schools that offer interviews, they're really diving into those interviews and looking at them a little more seriously now. They're looking at that resume. They're looking at those essays. They're looking at those teachers and recommendation letters, where teachers' recommendation letters kind of didn't always weigh in as much. They're definitely looking at those a little bit more. And we will talk about that, because I know that there was a whole year that students didn't get to really know their teachers. And so when you're choosing the teachers that are going to be giving you recommendation letters, you want to make sure you're developing those relationships with them. Fortunately, for those of you here, your students are not going to actually have as much of an issue with not knowing their teachers as the last 2 years have had, because obviously they were in the most crucial years of that piece of their college process during COVID, and not having teachers in person affected that. But for you guys, that's not going to be as big of a concern. So we're going to again jump into what did you do during COVID. On Friday, I'm going to go through a whole section on your resume, talking about what to put and how to build that out. So you definitely want to be here for that, because that resume does weigh in to and is a pretty huge part. And what the colleges are looking for is to see that there is depth and breadth in your student's application, meaning that they realize that things were canceled. They know that. But what can we pull out that your student did, maybe even in their own time, when they were sitting home for all those hours during when the schools were doing online school and they weren't able to participate in those sports and things. What can we pull out from their interest and so forth that we'll put on there? So we will definitely be doing that with them, looking at that when we build out that resume. Okay. And again, we're going to talk about that. There are a lot more essays, and we're going to jump into the more essay part a lot Thursday night. Sorry. Thursday night, we're going to dive into all things essays, and I'm going to talk about the essay and the personal statement essay specifically. Okay. So let's talk about test. So this is another reason that we are seeing this holistic review. We saw hundreds of schools that dropped the standardized test. We talked about this last night, but what we're seeing as the replacement for those tests. And even though tests have come back, we talked about that last night. If your student can get into a testing facility, get those tests done, get a good test score, that's going to help their application for sure. But even with those test scores, even with them coming back, the colleges are now replacing a lot of that and putting the other criteria and focus on all of these other things, which can be very daunting for our college seniors, our high school seniors, and would-be college freshmen. And I think where the overwhelm really comes is that everything starts for your student in the application process the moment they take their first high school credit. So that can be 7th or 8th grade. So 7th and 8th grade and junior, those under junior high years, they do not count things that they did, activities, awards, all of those things do not go onto the college application. So they're not going to look at any activities they've done prior to 9th grade. They will look at the academics. So when you're looking at those academics, it's not just what is their GPA or what was their grade, but they want to know what was the courses, what kind of, what is your process? Like, what are the courses that your student is taking and has taken. Are they taking those advanced classes or are they not? All of those things will come into play when they're looking at the academics. So now, once they hit their freshman year, they begin to look more in depth at all of those activities. There's an awards section. People ask a lot about that. They'll say, "My kid doesn't have awards," and in the past, that's been fairly true. A lot of high schools do not give a lot of awards out. So therefore, students have to apply and participate and do things outside of the traditional classroom to get those things on their schedule or on their resume. So that's why starting this process as a freshman or a sophomore is definitely an advantage, because you're able to know, okay, we need to make sure that we're participating in activities that are going to build that award section, or we're weak in this particular area in our resume, so we need to build it. Now for our juniors, if your student really doesn't have awards, we just remove it. It's not going to be detrimental, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we're showing every bit of all of the things that make them unique, that make them stand out, and that show their strengths, whatever those things might be. Okay, so let's talk about the holistic review. I've kind of shared what that is in general, but let's dive into it in more depth. So the holistic review includes their class rank if that's available. Not all schools rank. It's really good if your school doesn't rank. Actually, that can help your students. So, but if they have a class rank, they look at that. They look at their GPA. They look at both their weighted and their unweighted. They look at the strength of their academic background. That's where I was talking about in 7th and 8th grade. If they are taking courses that are more advanced, that are going on their high school transcript, they're going to know that. They're going to see, okay, they started out on an advanced curriculum as early as junior high. Now, maybe they did or didn't, but once they get in high school, they're still looking at how many APs, how many dual credits, how many honors classes, are they an IB? What is the course load, and what does the school offer, and what did your student take in relationship to what is offered? And so one thing I will tell you is that not only does this affect, and all of these things affect your student getting into college, but it also does play into their scholarship amounts, because there are certain standardized scholarships that will go if your student has a certain GPA or a certain test score, they're going to get that scholarship. Or they look at various things, that leadership and so forth, that can give them scholarship. But when you're competing for those big scholarships that could be, potentially a full ride or a half a ride for the school year, this all comes into play in a big way. So you want to make sure that they are taking a full load. And especially for our juniors who are right now making and choosing their high school classes for next year, don't slough off. A lot of kids are like, oh, I can have 3 off periods. Well, you could have 3 off periods, but that's probably not going to look really great on your transcript, nor are colleges going to look at that favorably. Or maybe you've taken all these APs and you're like, okay, I finished everything, I don't need to take all these APs. That's not going to play favorably either. I'm very much about your student finding balance. So I don't necessarily think that your student should take all AP classes and stress themselves out. There are students that can do that and can handle it. And if that's your child, then great. But if it's going to stress them out, then find balance in what they're doing. It's okay to have an off period if that's really fits into their schedule and they're still taking a strong core of classes, then there's not a problem with them having that one off period. But just consider all those things as they're moving into their senior year, because while their grades at the end of their junior year are the grades they're applying with their senior year, they still look at those senior year courses. And many schools will request a midterm transcript as well as an end of the year transcript. And colleges can rescind offers if a student says, I'm taking all of these classes and then they didn't take them, or they failed them, or they went from having A's to a big drop in their GPA. So all of that's things that you just need to remember. So again, a record of achievements, honors, that's the resume, special accomplishments. This can be work, it can service. A lot of people ask me, maybe your child didn't have a job. That's not going to hurt them. Maybe your child had a job and wasn't able to participate in as many activities. That's okay too. What we just want to do is highlight their strengths and the things that make them stand out. It's not about comparing to what everybody else did. It's about making your student really stand out and show their strengths in their resume and in all areas of their application. Again, the essays are going to weigh in. That not only includes that personal essay, but all of those supplementals that we talked about. Special circumstances, they're going to look at that. Maybe your student is in a rural area and that college really needs to have a student from this little country town in the middle of some state, and they don't have students from that area and they want to pull one in. So your student may be the only one that applies, and that can make the difference in them getting in. I know that sounds crazy, but it really is. So they have all of these things that they have to hit. They are required by law to make sure that they are including a very diverse group of students. And that diversity is a pretty broad spectrum of different things. And so just know that all of those things go into that application, and it can play to the positive or the negative sometimes for your student. And that's the one thing that's out of your student's control. You're not going to pack up and move because you live in a certain area. I'll have students that will go to a certain high school that's really competitive, and all the students have really, really high GPAs, and maybe all of those kids are applying to one university. That university isn't going to accept all the students from that one school because they have to look at all the other areas, all the other students in all of the other states, as well as their own state, and all the different socioeconomic groups and so forth. So just know that all goes into it as well. The recommendations, and then the competitiveness of the major. So if your student is applying to a competitive college in engineering, business, those are two of the big ones, computer science, sometimes certain art programs are really competitive. All of those things can really make that process even more competitive. So you have to know that they're going to be looking, if your student's applying in the medical end or maybe a STEM area or engineering, they're going to be looking at your students' STEM courses and classes and all of that even heavier than they would if your student wasn't applying in that area. Now, I will tell you, I don't recommend your student to go out and apply to a major that seems like not as many students are applying to, just to get into the university thinking they're going to shift, because that is very difficult to do in these competitive colleges. They accept a certain number of students, and they will have some students that will drop out, but they only have so much room to bring in a new student, and they're going to be looking at each student that wants to apply. So basically, if they go in as a freshman in a different major, they want to apply and shift over, they're going to have shown a lot of strength in their math and science classes, which they may not have taken depending on their major, and they're competing against lots of other students. Typically, in a lot of universities, it's harder to transfer into a business or an engineering or a medical type field than it is to go in as a freshman. So just keep that in mind as you're thinking through that. And what you don't want is your student to go, I'm going to apply to be a French major or a foreign language major, and then they never get into the degree that they really wanted. So that's just something to remind yourself of and remind them of as they're going through this process. Okay. 2, grades and academics. So everybody asks, are grades still important? Obviously, you all know the answer to that is yes. The grades are what I call the gatekeeper. That's the first hurdle they have to get over. They are going to look at their transcript. They look at your school's profile. If you don't know what your school's profile is, then I would encourage you to go to your high school website, search school profile, and it'll come up. It will tell you what the average SAT or ACT is for your your particular school. It tells you all the pertinent information about your school. It tells the college that. It tells them what the average GPA is. It tells them what kind of programs, what kind of diplomas they offer, all of those things. So the colleges want to know as much about the school you're applying or that you're coming from as they do about your student. And a lot of students don't realize that they're looking at that student or that school profile. So I encourage you to go check that out. Know what is that average SAT ACT score? What is the average GPA? What are the different things that they're going to measure your student against when they look at your particular school? Again, academic rigor, we talked about that. It's really important to balance or make sure, depending on what you're, where you are as far as class rank. If you're in that top 5%, then you're going to pretty much have to continue to take all APs to hold that rank, especially if you're going for valedictorian, salutatorian, any of those things. If that's not the case and you feel like your child's going to be too stressed taking all APs or they're not going to do well, we don't want them to go in and take an AP and not do well. So we want to find a balance in that, but you just want to make sure that they are bringing in those college, level courses and that they're taking them and doing well on them. Again, they're going to need to show, they're going to look at how many AP classes they took. They're going to look at what the scores they made on them. They're going to ask them to report those. The same thing with IB. If they're in an IB school, then it's the same type thing, just switch out IB for AP. They're looking for all of those things. And then, with the test optional situation we're in, those AP and IB scores can weigh in a lot heavier now because that gives them a baseline when they're looking at students to know if your student can academically do well in the school. So, when they're looking at the grades and the GPAs and all of those things, they're looking to see, can your student be successful? The last thing they want is your student to come there and not be able to actually academically keep up and then, not make it, fail out or drop out or something to that effect. Because that hurts their numbers. It hurts the students because many of those students don't end up going back to college. And so overall, it's a non-win for everyone. So that's why they're looking at those academics. So just know the academics are going to continue to play a big role in your students' overall profile. And that is the first hurdle. So again, it goes into more than just looking at that GPA. One thing a lot of people don't realize is that many colleges will go in and they recalculate GPA. And most students don't realize that. So they still look at that. What's your GPA for your particular school? They know from your counselor what the highest GPA is in the school. So let's say it's a 4.3 and you have a 4.1. They know the gap between you and the highest GPA is, a couple of points. So they know that and they want to consider that as they're going forward. They do count in how many AP, IB classes you've got. They're going to look at that. But then they're going to go and recalculate your GPA, pulling out all of those courses that are not what they call core classes, meaning if it's an English-based class, a science-based class, a math-based class, or a social science-based class. If it doesn't fall in those 4 areas, they're going to remove those grades from their transcript and recalculate their GPA. They also calculate it without any weight. So they come up with their own calculated GPA for your students. So a lot of kids don't realize that. They just think, oh, well, the GPA, the weighted GPA that I'm sending in is the only GPA they're looking at. And like I said, I don't want you to think that they're not considering that or that that's not a part of it, because it is. It's just that they go back through and recalculate that GPA to determine from their perspective what the GPA really is, minus all of the fluff, as I would put it, I guess, meaning the weight and all of the different things, the courses they take that are not those academic courses, they look at all of that. So that's all important things to know as you're going through that and what they're looking at as far as the academics go. Okay. Number 3, uniquely you. Now, tomorrow night, we're going to dive into uniquely you and what that is. To me, this is probably the most important thing that your student can do that can truly impact their application outside of their GPA. So, like I said, that's their gatekeeper, that's their first hurdle. If a student can't make it academically on a campus, then they're going to most likely move them into, a denied pile. Now, it depends. If they're on the border academically, they'll continue to look at the whole application to determine, was there something that went on that caused a student to have a low grade? They can see flags. They can tell, like, oh, this student during COVID, during 2020 had this low GPA, and now all of a sudden they don't. They obviously didn't do well for some reason based upon what was going on in the circumstances in the world. So they're not going to hold those things against your students. So I don't want you to feel like, oh, well, if they don't make a certain GPA, they're not even going to be looked at. But just know that they do look at that, and that is a huge piece that they have to get past. So then they go into looking at the rest of the application, and those are all the things that I talked about early on. So uniquely you is what makes you you. What makes your student diverse? One of the biggest essays that has been added in the last couple of years, and I have seen this in almost every single college across the board, is they talk about diversity. They ask what makes your student diverse, and they ask the student to talk about that. And so typically most teens, being young, immediately think, okay, diversity means like my race or maybe my economic background or something to that effect. So that's what that's where their mind immediately goes. But diversity for a college goes well beyond that. They're looking at again, it goes back to that, what makes your student unique? What makes them different than all the other students that are in the same school as them, sitting in the same classes as them? And all of our students have those things that make them unique, that make them stand out, that make them who they are. It could be a passion they have. It could be a point of view that they feel. It could be, a lot of things in their life, whether it's a family situation, maybe it's their culture, maybe it's something that they've grown up, doing their whole life and that they believe in. All of those things can make a student diverse. And what we have to do is get our students to think beyond just the surface. And that's what colleges are looking for. And I know this sounds totally crazy because we're talking 17 and 18-year-olds. And I totally get it. When I was 17 and 18, I'm sure that those were not things that I really understood about myself either. And so that's why for me, I take students through an entire process of really learning about themselves and thinking through what makes them unique and thinking beyond the things that are just like that surface level. So I just had somebody ask, she said she had 2 kids that are nothing alike, so I need this course again to approach it in a fresh way. Oh yeah, that was Sarah. Yeah, absolutely. That's an important thing is that our kids are very different and very unique. And so no 2 kids are going to go through this process the same. And so we have to get them thinking about who they are. And it's really hard, I think, with siblings because our younger kids many times will think about an older sibling or see what they've gone through. And so they want to be like their siblings sometimes. And we have to get them finding what makes them unique and what makes them different. And that's what's really important. What are their core passions and values? So we talked about demonstrated interest yesterday and showing that in, to a college. And one of the things that the colleges are looking for now is that they have, their mission statement. And they want to know that this is going to go to their school, that they're going to accept are aligned with whatever that mission statement is. And so once a student understands, oh, core values, this is really, maybe I believe, maybe sustainability is something that's really, really, really important to me. Like, I want to go out and create new systems that are going to like help our planet, and that's just what I'm so passionate about. And I've done volunteerism around it. I have done research. I've done all of these things as a kid, and they start figuring that out. And then they go to look at that particular school, and that school has no desire, it's not something they care about or think about at all, then that's not going to be a good fit. And that can be a negative in the college admissions process. So you don't want your student adjusting who they are to, quote unquote, fit into that college's box. What we want to do is help our kids find out who they are so the college fits into our box, if that makes sense to you. So that's why this piece is so, what is the impact that they're making on the world? And I promise you, if you ask your student this, they're going to say, I'm not unique. I haven't impacted anything, no, I don't know what my passions are. I mean, I'm just trying to hang out with my friends and get through high school. And we want them to do all of those things. And that's important. And that's why, for me, I try really hard to make this a fun process. And I love it when I see the kids I work with, their eyes go off, and, their eyes light up, and, it's like all of a sudden in their brains, it just connected, and they're like, oh my goodness, I get it now. This is me. This is what makes me authentic. And I think that the one thing I've heard from college admissions counselors across the board at almost every school is they're looking for the student's unique voice. They want to hear the student, they want them to be authentic, and they want to really know who they are. And today, in our world of social media and all of these things, when it gets down into the nitty gritty, most of these counselors are Googling your kids. They go in, they're trying to figure out, does what they're saying, does it really align with what we're seeing in the social world or in various other places? And sometimes not having any kind of presence at all can be a negative for them. And so while that's not technically part of the application process, what most people don't realize is the average age of a college admissions counselor who's making the decisions about your students' next step is going to be 35 and under. So, there are very few college admissions counselors that are in that 45 to 60-year-old age. And so the younger these college admissions counselors are, the more tech savvy they are, the more when they're sitting around and they're going through these applications and they're trying to make a decision, is this student a student I really want to fight for or not? They're going to Google them. It's just kind of part of, that process. So before I go to the next slide, well, I'll come back to that. I want to just kind of share with you what that process is too, to make sure you know how what goes through a college office, so that you kind of know that process too. So again, your Uniquely You tells admissions officers what makes you different from all the other smart, talented students who are applying to the same college as you are. It's not about what you do, it's about who you are. And this is the cornerstone of the college application. And when I see students that really are able to hone in on that and focus and bring that into their application, then that's the students that I see getting accepted, getting scholarships, moving forward, and so forth. So that's all very important part of that process. Okay, a strong profile. This is the resume. So when you're building out that profile, the things that you want to hit, the tick marks, are going to be leadership. This can be self-leadership. They have to be like, oh, I'm, president of my class, or I'm or something to that effect. Leadership can be self-leadership. It can be stepping out and starting a new club, or doing something on your own, going out, doing a research project just because. That shows leadership from a self-leadership perspective. But you do want to make sure that you're starting to build that leadership. It can be that you are working part of a team of some kind, and your student stays after and just cleans up the locker room because nobody else has done it and they just choose to do those things. So leadership can come in all sizes. So just keep that in mind. Volunteerism, obviously, we do want them to have volunteer hours. Colleges do look at that. And I can tell you that if your student's part of Key Club or um, National Honor Society, those things, they have all these required ones. And that's great. And you want to put that on there, but they're really looking to see, did your student choose to volunteer and do something and give back on their own out from it? So that's something you want to just keep in mind. Demonstrated interest in your career path. So I know this is a big thing. Most kids are still trying to figure out what they want to do. There's a lot of adults that tell me I'm still trying to figure it out. And I know that that is really the case. But nowadays, going undecided, it can be a real negative. So helping our kids really understand, okay, I might not know exactly what I want to do, but I at least have an idea that I like this particular field. And then taking classes, joining clubs, attending summer camps, doing internships, all of those things that would, any of those things that would fall under your major is also a big plus. And then demonstrated interest in passions, meaning that your child may love to play piano. Maybe you're a major piano player, they love to play piano, or maybe they love to read, or they write plays all the time, or poetry. And they're not going to major in those things, but they are passionate about it. So we want to show they've showed some demonstrated interest in that, and that makes them diverse, makes them not just that one kid that's one brain. It makes them the kid that has a few different interests and is able to pull that all together and show their passions in it. And again, we're going to dive into resumes a lot more. So I'm going the extra mile. So before I go in and explain all of this, I wanted to back up and talk about the college admissions office in general. So basically what happens is that you have a college admissions office, and within that office are several different counselors. These counselors can be divided up by region. They can be divided up by alphabet. There's a lot. Typically it's done by region, but it can be a lot of different things. Okay. So you have those counselors. In addition to them, you have what we call recruiters. Most of the time, your students are actually meeting recruiters. So if they're going to a college fair, whether it's online or whether it's in person, maybe a particular school college came to their high school and they met somebody, they come home and they said, I talked to this counselor and they were like, it's a great school and I'm super excited. The most likely they didn't talk to the counselor, they talked to a recruiter. Those recruiters are designed to go out and get information and start figuring out which kids would be suited for their university. They have no bearing in the college decision. But what they do is they're able to take back a list of names where they're saying, these kids came and talked to us. So that's the first step of showing demonstrated interest, because the counselors then have those kids' names that they came, they showed up, whether it was a virtual event, a live event, whatever that looks like. Okay. So those things are important. Then from there, the counselors have a whole list of applications. All applications are essays. The essays within applications are typically always read by two people. So one counselor goes through and reads, and then another counselor will go through and read as well, just to make sure that they're both giving any insight that they might have to that particular application. Some colleges actually have specific essay readers only who come in, and that's what their job is to read essays, to evaluate, to give input, and to help build that part of that application score out. Then as if I'm the lead in the application process and I'm looking at all of these students, so I have only a certain percentage of students that I'm looking at their applications. So then typically what's going to happen is I'm going to go through those applications and I have to decide, okay, these students I know are going to be denied. These students are either going to be accepted or waitlisted. Or maybe they're deferred. And so what I do is I have to go through and I'm allowed to bring a certain percentage of my applications to the table. Okay. So then we all come to the table, and maybe there's 6 college counselors that are within that room. So then each application is put up on a board, or however, the screen, a computer, whatever. We're looking at them, and I am then talking through my list of students, and I'm saying, okay, this student is a reason. I really feel like this student should be admitted. This is my reasoning behind it. And then everybody else is evaluating what I've done. The admissions office votes. Yes, they're accepted, they're denied, they're waitlisted, or they're deferred. And I know it's crazy because then it comes down to a vote, but sometimes that's just the way it is. There are algorithms and computer numbers and all kinds of things that go on in the background as well that makes it a little more complicated. I'm really watering down how that works, but I do want you to know that's the basics of it. So just know that your student's application is going to be viewed by a lot of students, but what all the counselors, but what you want is to make sure that your student's counselor is got all the information so that when they're looking at that application, that they have all the information and everything that they need to know to go in and be able to say, yes, I want to pick, John, and I think he would be a great candidate, and this is why. And that they actually have a picture of him, even if they've never seen that student before. So that's why that uniquely you plays into it so much, because as I'm going through and I'm deciding which students that I'm going to move forward, if I'm reading an essay that's very generic, then there's not anything that's going to stand out about that. And I'm not going to dive into essays because tomorrow or Thursday night is going to be all about essays. But I do want to make sure you understand that this is why all of the pieces are important and why that uniquely you is so important in the process as well. Now, how can you go the extra mile? So portfolios. People used to think portfolios are just for, the arts. That's not true. You can actually go in and create portfolios online. There's portfolio software. There's you can use Google Docs. The students can do however they want. They can create a website. Basically, though, they need it to be simple, straightforward, and you have to know that a college admissions counselor will only spend about 7 to 9 minutes on your student's application outside of reading essays. So when you think about that, they're going through, they're looking, they're going quickly. So if your portfolio has an hour-long video, they're going to click out of that and they're never going to look at it. So you want to make sure that you're able to give them a link that goes straight to something. And inside a portfolio, you could put things like academic papers, words, or pictures or videos of specific things that would support your resume. And again, you have to think through this and make sure that you're only putting a small handful of sampling, not a full all out, 30-minute presentation that I'm going to have to look at. So that's something to remember. Social media, I talked about it. Social media can play negatively if your student is not, I think how to put this, when they need to be careful in what they're saying on social media. Colleges want kids to be real. They know teenagers are going to take selfies. They shouldn't stop doing those things, but they also need to just make sure that they're not saying or doing inappropriate things or appearing that they're like in a, at a party, drinking alcohol as an underage student. That's the kind of things you don't want to, have showing up on their social media. And I'm sure as a parent, that's not what you're wanting them to have either. So, just make sure their social media is a good representation of who they are, but just know that they can Google them and find them. And I tell kids all the time, they'll say, well, my social media is set to, I have certain privacy and things to that effect. And yeah, that does definitely deter a lot. But like I said, we have a younger generation, and most of them know ways to get around to find, information or be able to see information that a student may not think is there. So just remember, if it's out there, it lives forever. So, but you can also use social media to your advantage by, going in and following the schools and that you're interested in, commenting on posts that they make that you favorable way, so forth. So social media also showing activities and things that you're doing. So I know a counselor was telling us recently that they had a student that they were just thought was amazing. And the student talked about that at Christmas, they always went and did this thing where they fed the homeless, and they had this whole like project that they did. And she talked about that this was a big thing they did every year at Christmas. And so what happened was that the person happened to be at Christmas sitting around Googling, pulled up the girl's Facebook, and she was snow skiing and and there was nothing at all about her and their family doing this big event. So in that person's mind, they began to think, okay, so is she being truthful in her application? She said that she does this every Christmas, and then they didn't. So maybe she did, but then her pictures weren't representative of her, she had said in her application. So just keep that in mind moving forward. Yeah, Sarah said, I believe the portfolio was a game changer for our current college freshmen. Yeah, that portfolio is huge, and it does make a big difference. So, and you did learn it here, didn't you? And so I'm excited that that's something I really help my students do, is create those portfolios. That's a big thing. Personal research. A lot of people don't think about this, but maybe your child just has a real passion. They want to go into something and they don't have a lot on their resume. They can go out and create their own research project. They can create their own service project that's around something that they're interested in. They can start their own business if they're entrepreneurial, or they can start a nonprofit. So all of those things are things that you can do that will take them the extra mile. So that is a lot, I know. So now we're at the Q&A time. So I want to take a breath, and I know I've just thrown a whole lot at you talking about this, talking about all the things that go into the actual college admissions decisions. But I want to make sure that if you have questions that I haven't answered, and like I said, there's a lot that goes in that I haven't discussed. Okay. So it's just, there's too much to put in to go through all of the nitty gritty that goes on behind, in the college admissions office. But what you do need to know is that there are ways to impact for your student to impact their application. It's important that they are standing independent, that they're not just rushing through these. I think that that's a big thing too. So, okay. So one question, let's see. Melinda asked, can you highlight anything in regards to athletics on a portfolio? So, you can, absolutely. Now, if a student is being recruited, that's going to be a whole different ball game. So they're going to have, be sending their, their reels and all of those things to the coaches. And that kind of goes on in a whole separate world. But in the admissions world, and even if a student is not going to, maybe they're not going to be trying to be recruited for athletics, but they were an athlete and they played, then you want to you can put together a really short, 1 minute to 1 minute, 1.5 minute video of like different little clips, of them doing that sport. And that would definitely strengthen the application because it shows that. One of the things I tell everybody, and I talked about this a little bit yesterday, but colleges are not necessarily looking for your child to do 14 million things. What they want to know is that your student is doing the things that really resonate with them. And so I always tell you to remember the 3 do's, and it's do it, donate, and demonstrate. And so what I mean by that, and I'm going to take her athletic as a baseball player. So I'm a baseball player and I go out and I play baseball. So I'm doing the sport, right? And then I'm going to donate. So maybe what I do is I go and volunteer at the local like baseball organization, and I go out and I, rake the baseball fields, or I, help maybe I help assistant coach, or I do something as far as, volunteerism where I'm not being paid. And then demonstrating would be where maybe you're doing something that you're going to demonstrate your interest outside of doing and outside of donating. Maybe that's that you are, helping, um, maybe you're creating videos that you're sharing with your teammates, or maybe you're researching on baseball all the time, and so that demonstrates your interest in that activity. So just think about that if you're in the science area. So let's say your kid loves robotics, so they join the robotics team, so they're doing it right. Maybe they volunteer at a whatever they're doing volunteer wise, they find something that goes around the science or the robotics or the medical field or something to that, or engineering, and they volunteer in that area. Maybe they volunteer at a science event, like maybe they have science, your junior high has a science fair every year, and they're volunteering at the science fair to help like judge, or they're probably too young to judge, but they're helping do something at that science fair. And then they're going out and they're demonstrating their interest by doing research and, or taking an extra class, or going to a science camp or something to that effect. So whatever the interest is for your student, make sure that they are doing all of those things. They do it, they donate, and they demonstrate. And that right there can be a big advantage to a student on their applications. So let me see what else can you highlight. Let me read that question. Can you get more information on the student? Oh, where can you get more information on the student portfolio? I will be sharing more about that as we move forward. And so definitely just hang tight with that. And I do have some software programs that I can recommend and all of that. So I'll kind of go into that as we move forward. But basically, one of the things that a student can actually do is create a website. So I tell students, this is not my ideal preferred way, but it is a free way to do it. So I always like to share with you guys things that you can do for free, and ways, sometimes you have to pay for things, but I always want to make sure you have a way to do things free as well. So you can go to wix.com, WIX, and your student can create a website there. They can add videos, things to that effect. What I will tell you is don't make 14 pages because they'll never look at it. Make one page that has just highlights the big, like maybe a quick video, maybe you have uploaded a research paper, something to that effect. Another thing is that if your students are doing any schools they're applying to on the coalition actually has a portfolio built into that application platform. And so your student can upload things and share with different people. So that's something they can do as well, is doing it through the coalition. Now, not all schools are on the coalition. So I'm getting lots of thank yous. You're welcome, guys. I hope this has been really helpful. Again, tonight there will be more homework. I'm going to stop really quickly because I want to do our giveaway, because I'm going to give somebody a book, and so I'm super excited about doing that. And I was going to share my screen because I have this beautiful wheel that spins, but for some reason the screen is telling me that I don't have sharing capabilities. I'm really not sure why. Of course, gotta love technology. So unfortunately, I can't show you the screen, but just in your mind, imagine that it's rolling around and it's going to shoot off like fireworks in a second. Okay. So if you emailed me, or if you did your homework in the Facebook group, then your name went on to the wheel. So I have quite a few names on the wheel. So I am going to click into spin, and I don't know if you can hear that or not, but it's spinning. And the winner of the book tonight is Persina, and I'm going to take just a really quick screenshot of that so that I can share that in our group. But Persina is here tonight because I called out her name. And so I'm super excited for you, Persina. And so if you will go in and send me a private message or an email with your address, I will physically get this book in the mail to you. And I will definitely be giving away more books. And don't forget that Thursday night at the very end of everything, I'm going to give away, one person will win access to Purposeful Parent, which is super exciting and definitely something you want to do homework to get your name in the drawing for that. And again, don't forget to do homework tonight. It will go up and be posted right after this. So, again, I try to keep the homework simple. It's just easy ways for you guys to get your name in the drawings. And I'm so glad that everybody has talked about how helpful it's been, those type of things. That's my goal, is that I want to make sure that you walk away with great information. So just to kind of give you a recap of what's going to happen this week. So tomorrow night, we're going to talk about Uniquely You. Again, like I gave you a highlight, but I'm going to dive into ways that your student can begin to think about and create that Uniquely You. On Thursday night, we're going to talk about essays because that is a huge piece. And I'm going to give you basically a timeline, which will help your students know what's coming, what's next, and so forth. And then on Friday night, we're going to put it all together. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually walk through the resume, interviews, letters of recommendation, the physical pieces, and I'm going to talk about financial aid and paying for college, because I know that's something that's on everybody's mind. So you're not going to want to miss. And again, if you're not able to get it live, you definitely can come back and watch the replay. So I want you to make sure that you're engaging, ask questions, reach out to me. And before we go tonight, I want to make sure, are there any other questions? I'm seeing lots of thank yous and very informative. The portfolio is an eye opener. Yeah, it definitely is. There are places that you can add that. And like I said, these are the things that can make a difference. And a lot of students just don't know. And I hear that from parents all the time. We don't know what we don't know. And I think that's true in so many aspects of our life. And I definitely know in the college process that it is. So I'm very blessed and honored to get to share these things with you guys. So if there are no other questions, which it doesn't look like there are, I think we are wrapping up for the evening. So I hope you guys have a great evening, a great mid of the week, Wednesday tomorrow. And I look forward to seeing you all here again at the same time tomorrow night. So have a great evening. So bye for now.